I'll request Mr. Rakesh Khanna to stay back for the next session as well. We are now ready to move into the world of crime, not literally though. But this one is one area that has always, undoubtedly sparks, this one area interest, it sparks interest. That's probably the reason why something like an Indrani Mukherjee case hogged limelight for days together. Everybody was hooked to it, media, people, even when there were other important things happening all around us. For that matter of fact, ever since the film Talwar hit screens, the Arushi Talwar case has once again hogged limelight. So the fact remains that crime thrills, but why it does is what our panelists are going to discuss. So let me invite on stage Mr. Ravi Shankar Etet and Mr. Showan Chaudhary. Can we have a round of applause for them? Mr. Ravi Shankar Etet is a man with many facets, author, political cartoonist, senior columnist. He's also worked as a graphic designer, as an author. His first short story was published in 1992 as a last addition to the Penguin Book of Horror Stories. It was followed by a collection of short stories dealing with the supernatural in 1996, The Scream of the Dragonflies. His first novel, The Tiger by the River, about a man searching for the bones of his grandfather who was a Holocaust victim, appeared in 2001. It was published in 9 languages, including Serbian. His most recent work, Book of Shiva, was published in 2014. Mr. Showan Chaudhary, as I mentioned earlier, is a Delhi-based writer whose blog, India Update, has over 2 lakh hits. He is the creator of the Trilokpuri incident, which is trying to understand an event that no one can remember. He's also the entire reporting staff of The Investigator. Thank you. I would now request Mr. Ravi Shankar Etet to take this session forward from here.
Is the mic on? Heavy stuff, huh? Lots of heavy stuff. Lots of intellectual stuff. So let us get into something more pedestrian like crime. And what's crime? Crime is about deception. So let me first start by introducing my panelists about deception. I mean, this man here looks like George Clooney, but he's not George Clooney. All right?
I usually get Rahul Gandhi. I'm surprised by this.
How much did he pay you to say that?
You don't know. All right. I mean, this man here, he looks like one of those gentle, whimsical kind of, Bengalis, but he has written one of the most Kafkaesque books, which I loved reading.
Thank you.
And interestingly, he is taking it forward by imagining crime. I mean, is it really a crime novel set in Calcutta, under the Chinese?
Yes, that's right. It's a crime novel set in Calcutta under the Chinese. It's under Chinese rule.
Oh, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. They have a governor who's from China.
Ironically, the Japanese nearly got to Calcutta.
He stepped on the young prince's foot at an orgy, and so he was posted to Calcutta as the governor.
Some imagination you got, man. Yeah. Great. And Rakesh here actually looks like George Clooney because he's got a Punjabi father, he's got an American mother, and a Tamil wife, and he is deeply interested in translating and publishing regional pulp fiction, international pulp fiction, etc., etc. So now, since we're going to talk about crime, does it thrill? Does crime writing thrill? Well, does crime thrill? Good question. Does crime writing thrill? That's a tough question. Now, whenever anybody gets onto a platform, you feel like pontificating, so I'm just going to pontificate a bit. Crime fiction, the moment people talk about crime fiction, there is this kind of intellectual contempt. I mean, it's not Kafka, right? I mean, it's not Shakespeare, right? I mean, it's just crime fiction. I completely disagree with you. I mean, because Macbeth is a crime story. And Crime and Punishment is a crime story. Dr. Zhivago is a crime story. In fact, as Raymond Chandler said, it is a citadel. Everyone wants a storm. So you have Charles Dickens writing a crime novel like Bleak House. You've kind of, Edgar Allan Poe who wrote crime novels, etc. Now, crime literature, as I put it, is divided into many genres because I don't think any other form of fiction has the kind of variety which crime literature has. You have, for example, you have the murder mystery, you have the detective novel, you have the lockroom mystery, you have the spy novel, you got the crime thriller, you got the American kind of very gritty kind of, there's stuff which kind of makes your adrenaline raise, and above all, there's historical crime fiction. So all of them, what do they do? I mean, they explore something very unique. They explore the evil in the human mind. What do you think, guys?
Exploring the evil that's in the mind. Massively popular.
Sorry?
Should I talk about Hindi stuff?
I'm pretty evil.
So there was a question this morning when Champa asked about why it is that Hindi movies are so popular and everybody watches them, but not so many people read Hindi books. So I think like up until a generation ago, actually, a lot of people were reading Hindi books, but they weren't the kind of Hindi books that anyone admits to reading. I think still, although I guess now maybe Chetan Bhagat and Amish have surpassed him, but up until very recently, the best-selling author in this country was Surendra Mohan Pathak, who had sold like upwards of 25 million novels, which is like the same number as like Salman Rushdie has sold worldwide. It's like he's but very few people at Litfests or in the English publishing scene have ever heard his name, and it's because like I think part of the thing with Hindi publishing is that there's a lot of crime actually in the publishing world also. The old pocket novel houses were based in Meerut, and a lot of the authors were plagiarists, very creative plagiarists, very artful plagiarists. There was some really interesting work being done where authors would take 30 pages from a Donald E. Westlake novel and translate it into Hindi, with Richard becoming Rahul and Chicago becoming Chandigarh and the pizza joint becoming a chaat stall, and then paste in another translation of a different novel and collect it all, seamlessly tie it together with some original writing and pass it off as their own work. And this has been sort of rampant in Hindi pocket novels for a long time.
No, in fact, you were telling me about, how... Are you guys familiar with Sudden, the cowboy Sudden? Any of you? No. You are? All right, great.
Sudden, yeah.
Now, he is telling me about Mizo novels. In Mizo, about Sudden hanging out, shooting people in Mizoram, am I right?
Yeah, so Mizoram, which is like the second highest literary rate in the country after Kerala, they're really into westerns. All of the Sudden was like a western cowboy hero. I think it was written by a British guy who had never actually been to the American West, but he wrote about the American West. And so all those novels got translated into Mizo. And then Mizo authors started writing their own Sudden novels, where Sudden would come to Mizoram and ride a horse around, and shoot people up. And so this is still massively popular there. And actually, I mean, there are other crime writers from the West who have been adapted into Konkani and adapted into Malayalam and
fascinating, absolutely.
Telugu, and
Now, the thing is that crime novels, they follow patterns. I think after Sherlock Holmes, he turned the whole thing, upside down. He completely set the trend for a new kind of fiction, which is followed by everybody. And then Agatha Christie came along. So a long time ago, I was having this chat with this very famous crime writer called P.D. James. I mean, she's one of the greatest of the 20th century. And James had this point, and we were discussing about Agatha Christie being the most popular crime writer. I think she's published the most among other crime.
Yeah.
No, Christie.
Christie's
Yeah.
best-selling.
So it had this perfect setting, right? I mean, evil was decent. I mean, it had a decent face. Even the murderers were extremely well dressed. I mean, they spoke excellent English in the right kind of an Oxbridge accent. And it was all cucumber sandwiches and kind of tinkling teacups and stuff like that. And in the end, you don't even feel the blood. I mean, in the end, it's like, there is this kind of stuff happening, people dying off one by one, and then there's a room in which the detective calls everybody, Paro. And the murder is solved there. Now, I want to jump from that to you, because, the only translated, Indian crime fiction I've read is Satyajit Ray, Feluda, right?
Sorry?
Satyajit Ray's Feluda novel?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I find them incredible. I find them, like, Feluda is like an addiction, as far as I'm concerned. And it's not a Calcutta I am familiar with anyway. I'm not very familiar with Calcutta. But, it brings out a Bengal which is not the Bengal you perceive as today. I mean, Bengal is so full of politics and riots and murders and deaths and, complete destruction of an elite educated class. But that was about a Zamindari Bengal, a Bengal which is supposed to be what Bengal is meant to be, in the Bengal of Tagore, the Bengal of Ray. So, how does since you are jumping into another time frame completely into the future, I'm jumping back into a time frame which is the past. So, does the relevance of somebody reading a book today in today's times he's familiar with, how does he or she relate to something which was just an idea in their mind or didn't exist at all?
Well, I think most crime fiction is fundamentally about the story. There are only a few of them. I think crime is the first thing we did. Really, if you think of cavemen and how we all, because it's good to start from first principles. So if you think of cavemen and let's say the first two cavemen, Jodu and Modu, and what are they doing really? Nothing much. I mean, they're eating, sleeping, going out, getting some fruit, coming back, eating, sleeping, doing a few other things. But that's
most
about
people
it.
are doing anyway.
So it was dead boring, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, after a while, they figured fruit wasn't good, and Jodu's wife is saying, "Let's get some non-veg." So then he and Modu go out, right? And they run after a deer and they catch it and they bring it back and they eat the deer, and that's good. They enjoy the deer. But still, life is pretty routine. Every morning either you go out and get some fruits or you go and catch a deer. And maybe they worked out a system. I mean, how they're catching the deer is because they learned that what you need to do is one of them catches hold of the deer and the other one, Jodu, let's say, bashes the deer over the head with a stick, right? And then they bring the deer back, right? So then one morning, Jodu thinks, while Modu's there on the ground with the deer pinned down, he's thinking, look, if instead of hitting the deer on the head, I hit Modu on the head, then all the deer meat is mine, and I don't have to give him and his nasty wife any of it, right? So he does that, and then he comes back alone with the deer. And Modu's wife asks, but where's Modu?
Back alone with my dear, and my dear is dead, and dear is
Modu's wife asks, where's Modu? And Jodu says, who? I think that's when crime started. So I think crime was the first major activity that it's human nature. I mean, I think our resistance to crime begins with toilet training. Because there are these rules and regulations, right? From the moment you're born, they're trying to lay these rules on you, like don't blow bubbles in your milk, don't put your finger in that plug point, wear pants. I mean, there's so much stuff that they keep making you want to do, So I think it's that natural resistance builds up. And what the crime novel does is it gives you a vicarious, it's really Moriarty, it's not Sherlock. It's just that because of Mummy and the rules she taught you, ultimately you sort of say, okay, fine, Sherlock got the guy. But you're rooting for Moriarty mostly.
Without Moriarty, there wouldn't be.
We're inherently criminal,
Yeah,
so, that's the basic thing.
No, you got a point. Now, this is a question to both of you because, you are bringing out, crime from other cultures in a genre which is very difficult to kind of, respectabilize, if I want to mean. I mean, the Pulp Fiction, the Penny dime novel, I mean, they're not really supposed to be great stuff. I mean, it's only today that, you really go back and people understand how relevant it is to the history of crime fiction, right? Now, how do both of you, I want to ask a question to the audience. Do all of you read crime or, are all of you interested in crime fiction or not? How many of you? It's not that many hands. How many of you read crime? All right. At least, thankfully, there are some non-intellectuals in this crowd. Great.
They're not admitting it. They're just publicly not admitting it.
That's what I thought too. Now, what I'm saying is that, both of you handle cultures, one in the imagination and one, which actually has existed. What is fascinating is that in today's bookshelves, you can see crime novels which bring to you alien cultures or, historical times. You have, the Elizabethan era historical novels, which are amazing. I would recommend you to read the books on Elizabethan spies, which are really, really, because it was a fascinating time in English history. Similarly, Robert Van Golik, who's written, a lot of novels based on an actual judge who lived in medieval, ancient China called Judge Dee. Amazing mysteries. And, you have, I don't remember who wrote it, but you have a guy who is set in I think John Chamberlain, that's the name of the hero. He's an ex-mercenary who's become a eunuch, but he is the main spy master of the Emperor Justinian set in Rome before the advent of Christ, or just after Christ kind of came into the picture. Now, what I want to ask both of you is that how does somebody take, from times which one does not even remember genetically, how does one take something like this and throw it to a modern public and get such a massive, massive reaction? I mean, if somebody asked me anything about Elizabeth in England, I wouldn't know a thing. I mean, if somebody asked me about, what happened in medieval China or whatever, I mean, I wouldn't know anything except terracotta soldiers. So, how does kind of impact people? How do they get it?
There's a writer in Tamil called Tamil Vanan who is a little bit older. He wrote in the 60s. And though he didn't write about different times, he wrote, his books are a little bit like James Bond, like the hero, the recurring detective hero, Shankar Lal, travels all over the world. So one book will be set in Japan, and one book will be set in Switzerland, and he solves a crime here. And everyone all around the world knows him because he's internationally famous Tamil detective. But Tamil Vanan himself, I don't think ever left Tamil Nadu. And he writes in a very pure Tamil without any English loanwords. So though the plots are very international, it's like pure Tamil. And I think it's, those books are really popular because those days who can travel to Switzerland and all that stuff? It's really expensive. You don't get visa easily and all that stuff. So I think it was like an excuse. No, we'll read an engaging crime story, but we'll also learn something about, and he would do a lot of research and actually talk about, Japanese culture, teach you some Japanese words in the book. So I think sometimes the crime stories can sort of be it's a package in which you can put a lot of other information, historical information or cultural information, make it more engaging.
So how do you see the resonance? I mean, how the resonance of, say, as I again repeat, Elizabeth in England, or Victoria in England, or the Bow Street Runners, or as we were talking about Boris Akunin in Tsarist Russia. How does it resonate with people who read about things they don't know anything about? Is it just simply because of the story, or is it the background of it? What is it?
Well, books are a way for lazy people to travel, actually, if you really think about it. You don't have to buy tickets and stuff. You just lie back on your sofa and you're traveling, right? There's a fundamental interest as a writer, in taking people to new places or showing people different places. So the best way to ensure that the place is new is to make it up yourself, right? Because then it's unique. Then it's up to you about
but you need research, right? I mean, you can't just imagine things happening in ancient China. You need research. You need detail.
No, otherwise it won't be very convincing, because you'll be making stuff up. I thought that I'd set these two books in the near future because it would save me a lot of research. So it took me about 14 years to complete the two of them. So that wasn't a plan that worked out very well eventually. But obviously the research is part of the fun, which sort of impels you into going into it. And the other is kind of that you're creating a new place. For me, the fun, one way of looking at reality is slightly at a tangent.
Yeah.
So if you take it slightly in the future, or you change one small thing, like, all the jobs in the country by government law are hereditary. So that bus conductors have little bus conductors along with them because that's their son, right? He's on the job. Yeah. Pizza delivery boys have their children. So you've got a scenario. So it's at a tangent, and that allows you to sort of throw light on what's actually happening. So it's a technique. For me, when I didn't realize initially. It took me some time. In the beginning, it was just, a fun thing to do. Let's do a book about, Bengalis and Chinese together. But then I realized that, while it's obviously still a detective story, that the Bengalis are people of the word. The word is pretty much all they've got, there are a lot of people who don't have much, but they've got a lot to say. So the words are very important. Whereas the Chinese are people whose whole entire society is built on the suppression of the word. They have the most sophisticated apparatus you can imagine and the mindset to go with it, to kind of suppress words. So that friction between those two things, I thought would be, and also, of course, the cultural differences. I thought that would be fun. So it's not necessarily the place, it's also the people in that place. Yeah. You want to go to maybe Victorian Britain because the Victorian Britain people are, awfully weird. That could be a good reason for doing it. So it's more people, really.
How much more time do we have to compare? Another 10 minutes? All right. Now, this is the ball is lobbed in your court right now.
Right.
Now, you have the one-liner, gritty American crime thrillers. I mean, sorry, thrillers.
Raymond
Chandler,
Chandler,
Hammett, which has produced this rather honest, taciturn, hard-bitten men with, soft hearts and a lot of cigarettes. And then you have the gentleman detective, or you have the, very, very very, very acutely conscious of the surroundings kind of priests like Cat Fale and people like that. Now, if you were to write a crime novel, are you planning to write one?
Oh, sometimes I think about it.
We'll think about it. Okay, then we'll think
So
about
who would my detective be?
If you were going to write a crime novel, what kind of novel would you like to write?
There's a thing that the Tamil detective authors do a lot where they have a couple. There's a guy and a girl. I don't know, this seems to be a typical thing only in Tamil detective novels as far as I can tell. I haven't seen it in other languages, but there's always a pair, and they're never married, and they're always kind of flirting. And it's great. It's like, there's this undercurrent of like, just he's trying to make some comments and she's getting angry and pinching him and stuff in the middle of like being, chained to a wall in the villain's lair or something. So there's I really like that. I think that's a great device.
All right, question for the audience instead of the other way around. How many of you have seen crime films, which have, adaptations of books they've read? Nobody? Okay. Which one is the one you're talking about? The guy in the... Yeah. Somebody give the gentleman a mic, please.
Agatha Christie, I heard.
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. I have read many crime books, but the main is Agatha Christie, like the comic books and the novels. Well, novels I have not read more, but mostly Agatha Christie comics. So according to that, some crime movies like Tintin, in which he was in the ship with a captain who was helping another captain. Those sort of movies I've seen. And but my favorite book is Agatha Christie comic series.
I can't hear you.
Agatha Christie comic series.
No, that's not what I was talking about. I'm not talking about your favorite books. See, for example, Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express was made into a movie, right?
Yeah, I've read Agatha Christie.
You're talking film adaptations. He's talking graphic novelizations.
Okay, because I couldn't hear properly.
And I have also seen some movies like Tintin, the crime book and all. Those all movies I've seen. And but including the books, I've only seen Agatha Christie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So do you think it's true to character?
No, the books are actually upon crime, so it circulates our mind to think a lot that who must be and who is the one who will be blamed at the end for this crime or that crime.
So which was better, the book or the movie?
Yeah.
Which was better, the book or the movie?
Book, obviously.
See, got something going. Now, this is something which I want to ask you.
Thank you.
In fact, you better more. I want to ask you about Lee Child. I mean, everybody knows Lee Child, I hope. Jack Reacher. Have you seen the movie Jack Reacher? I mean, Reacher? No? Oh. Okay, I mean, here's Jack Reacher, who is an ex-military cop, who just wanders around America, righting wrongs. I mean, he's the original Western, Wild West hero transplanted into today's kind of America. Now, when they wanted to make a film, the writer, they were looking at many actors, and many actors, including George Clooney, wanted to play Reacher. But Reacher's like 6'4" or something like that. Like, he is really one of the heavy guys, because to handle a military cop has to be bigger than the soldiers. Now, who did they choose? They chose Tom Cruise. I mean, who doesn't look like anything like Jack Reacher? Tom Cruise is shorter than 6, and he's got this really nice baby face, and etc. etc. Now, if any of the novels, the pulp novels or the Malayalam or English translations were turned to movies, how much of authenticity would you like to kind of impose on the characters if it's translated on screen?
Well, I guess the recent example was Byomkesh Bakshiga. So I think
Don't get me started.
There
Don't
were
get me
definitely two
started.
camps on that one. Right? So yeah, I mean, I've not actually read the originals, but they changed the character completely. So yeah, actually, most of the Tamil authors we worked with are not too keen on having their books turned into movies. There's one author, Indra Sandarajan, who gets televised a lot. But yeah, I think most of the authors I've spoken to in Tamil think that the Tamil industry would get it wrong. Ibn Safi, the Pakistani writer I was talking about earlier, they did make one. They did make one Ibn Safi movie, but I don't think it was a big hit. I'm confused as to why those haven't been made into movies actually more, because he's massively popular across large swaths of North India and Pakistan.
I saw the movie too. Did it actually portray Byomkesh Bakshi as he was kind of imagined by the author?
I think you should tell.
No, you answer no.
No. I mean,
I just saw the movie. I haven't read the books. I was told they got it all
What time
wrong.
do we have? That's the first question.
5:30. We have time till 5:30. 30 minutes to kind of more.
No, firstly, Byomkesh Bakshi always wears spectacles. This is a known fact.
So do you.
And yeah, and obviously, so I'm obviously supporting other spectacled people. And I think that was a big mistake. See, Dibakar Banerjee is a friend of mine. We used to work together at one point. And I think the problem is he's watched too much Bulgarian cinema. There was a 17-page interview with Dibakar in Caravan magazine, which unfortunately Anjum is not here, otherwise we raised the issue with her. Because 17 pages is, look, I mean, there's a limit, right? And at least 13 of those pages he talks about Bulgarian cinema. And from that moment, I knew that this Byomkesh movie was going to be a disaster. And obviously it was. And the Bulgarian influence is very clear in the way it's been made and put together, all that. I would just refer us back to, but, I think the original thing you were talking about, the portrayal and, in general, how we react to the it depends. I mean, again, there's so many young people, you might not have seen it, but Hercule Poirot, for example, as a detective, is extremely well defined by Agatha Christie. She defined him, when she was like 30, and maintained that for the next 45. So she was very clear about who Hercule Poirot was. And after you read 10 of those books, you're also very clear. You can predict that in a situation, if Hercule Poirot came to dinner, what you have to do, you're very clear about, right? And he's described very cleanly, but in a version of Death on the Nile, he was played by Peter Ustinov, the actor. It doesn't really matter who he was or what the movie was, but my point is that he's a huge man. He's a huge, sloppy, unkempt a man who doesn't remotely look like Hercule Poirot in any sense. But when you watch the movie, he kind of pulls it off. So I think, a lot of the portrayal also depends on who's doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom Cruise probably has enough chutzpah to kind of pull off anything.
No, he did actually. He did
and
pull it
you'll
off,
believe it.
Yeah, he did pull it off actually.
Yeah, so
I'm
yeah, it
actually
depends on
thinking
who's doing it.
like Humphrey Bogart was the face
Yeah, wow.
of Sam Spade. I mean, he was Sam Spade, right? And I think when you think of Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett novels, you think of Humphrey Bogart. But I remember my American grandmother, telling me that she thought he was totally wrong for the role. And she read Chandler before those movies were made, so yeah, I don't know.
But Byomkesh is not like that. I just want to emphasize. It's not a case where 30 years later people
So
will
who's
say,
who?
this was
Are
actually
you
a fantastic
sure?
movie. That's not going to happen.
Are you sure?
I just wanted to be clear.
I don't know. Again, some interaction. I have the most of you sitting here, or all of you sitting here, have you all read Sherlock Holmes? Can I have some hands in the air, please? That's it? Conan Doyle? That's it? 5 hands, 6 hands, 7 hands? That's it? This
Just
is...
because you're saying people will raise their you.
Yeah, that's also true. Well, so long they don't can raise the legs and
basic
kick me out. Now, do all of you watch English TV, television? All of you do? Have you been seeing this new Sherlock Holmes? Now, here is a Victorian, am I right?
Yeah.
Here's a Victorian detective with very, very well-defined kind of, character, mannerisms, dialogue, and a very well-defined Watson, and a very well-defined Moriarty. And it's so well defined, and suddenly you have a genius of a director. I don't know who's directed the movie, directed
Mark
the
Gatiss.
series.
Mark Gatiss. It's Mark Gatiss.
Okay. And you have this television series set in contemporary London featuring Sherlock Holmes and Watson. I mean, it's like, what he's talking about the future? It's like, time travel, right? I mean, it's really like time travel. So, you can use an authenticity of a character and the challenge to, retain the essence of that character. It's a combination of both the talent of the director and the actor. Now, how acceptable is it to either of you? Let's say Hercule Poirot in Bengal, investigating something Feluda couldn't solve.
Let's talk about Feluda, actually. Yeah. And since we're talking about Feluda, I just want to spend 2 minutes just talking something of great importance, which has nothing to do with the topic, but I'll only take 2 minutes. It's about the Rasgulla, and I just want to say that, Satyajit Ray has passed away. Injustice has been done to Ganguly. Bappi Lahiri has also been sidelined. Public has not adopted Rabindra Sangeet to the extent that we would expect. Even Netaji now they are saying it could be that he is no more. So under these circumstances, I would just humbly request, please leave the Rasgulla alone. Our entire system of pronunciation is based on it. So please, you have so many things, and I hope many more things will also come. But let us. Sorry, what was the question? It's just sorry.
So who's your favorite detective?
Feluda. We were talking.
Feluda.
See, Feluda is a perfect Bengali. He was a Bengali ideal. He had no mother. He had no wife. Yeah.
A Bengali ideal without a mother is not a Bengali ideal. I'm sorry.
He never went to the bazaar. You never read anywhere. Feluda, was he going to Machar Bazaar? Was he buying vegetables? Nothing. Every Bengali gentleman in the morning with the thole, at least my uncles, I don't know about other family, with the thole you leave in the morning, you do the bazaar and then you come back, right? None of these things he did. I mean, when we were kids and reading him, it was like, wow, man, what a life. How do you get a life like that? And we realized, okay, it's if you become a better detective. And how do you do that? By reading more of these books. So you keep reading the books, in the hope that one day you'll also become more like Feluda. So yeah, at Shoumitro also, that was a factor. All the girls loved him. So we were saying,
the joys of a youth.
Yeah. You were saying you used to read Kottayam Pushpanath in Malayalam, yeah?
Who?
Kottayam Pushpanath?
Oh, Kottayam Pushpanath is amazing. I mean, I must tell you, this is a Malayali detective. I think I was reading him in the 70s. It was very popular. Have you been to Kerala? It's so hot and muggy. But here is this guy standing under a street lamp in the fog. There's no fog in Kottayam. Wearing a overcoat and a fedora and smoking a pipe. I mean, what he's talking about is the same guy. But that guy is one of the most popular detectives in Malayalam pulp fiction. But anyway, I want to ask you, who are your favorite detectives?
Well, obviously Feluda is one for the reasons that I stated. This is a kind of serious thing, but Arkady Renko actually, because you know what he did, Martin Cruz Smith, when he did those Arkady Renko books, he brought politics into the detective novel, and somebody once said that every novel is an act of politics actually. But detective novels, by design, they tend to almost sanitize themselves and take out, in order for the story to work well, for you to get your satisfaction. It's got to be designed in a certain way. So he kind of brought the whole, you can trace the evolution of Russia from the collapsing Soviet Union to Putin, or however you pronounce his name, that guy, through the Arkady Renko novels, actually. The way they think, the situation they were facing. And they're all cracking good mystery stories at the same time. Yeah. So I think he'd be my favorite, really.
The new Arkady, I think it just came out, I think early this year, I think.
Yeah. He's so cool. He's very cool.
He's very cool.
And Rebus, because I learnt about single malt from him, my wife gifted the first Inspector Rebus novel. She now regrets it very deeply because I got to know what to order. He was drinking something. I won't tell the names because the children are all here. But he was. It would describe. He would describe what he was drinking, and I said, "Wow, I want to drink that too." So he kind of turned me into a semi-alcoholic kind of.
Semi-alcoholic. So, I mean, if you Oh yeah, does crime thrill any of you guys? Oh, it does. All right. Okay, so now, why does crime thrill? Oh, you're telling me what it is.
Yeah. No, why does crime thrill? I think particularly in India, crime thrills because we have so many of them. I think that, when a market expands, naturally, it becomes more lucrative. And in our case, the number of crimes in terms of, the number that are being committed has multiplied. Also the variety, see, we started with a great work called the Indian Penal Code of 1861, which still is in force, and it's a great work. A lot of crimes are described in that. Many of those, I'm sure, we don't know that we're committing crimes, but we are. Plus, they've added new ones. Like, the Brihan Mumbai Municipal Council has made it a crime to put underwear on lingerie on a mannequin because the minds of young men might be corrupted. So if you put lingerie on a mannequin now, you could be arrested because you've committed a crime. I'm not sure what they do. This is what they do in Bombay. Saudi Arabia is too far away, so I can't really comment. In Bareilly, if you don't paint your dog blue, you could be arrested. No, there's a scientific reason for that, though. It's not random. It's very scientific. This was last year. They had a lot of killer dogs. Had a lot of killer dog attacks in the neighborhood, and the district magistrate decided that action needed to be taken. So what he did was he got together a lot of experts, and they decided that the best thing to do would be to take the uninfected dogs and paint them blue, so that people knew that the blue dogs were safe, whereas if the dog wasn't painted, then it was unsafe. So that it was a crime at that time to have a dog who wasn't painted because you weren't following the district magistrate's explicit instructions issued in writing, right? So, I mean, my point is that, there are more and more crimes all around us. Criminals seem to reach fairly powerful positions. So naturally you want to read...
vote for them?
No, we vote for them. So we want to read crime fiction because we want to find out how they did it. You want to be... It's a question of studying. It's like textbooks, really, is how I see it. Crime novels are the textbooks for us in modern India today.
Surendra Pathak actually had a copycat bank robbery after one of his novels.
Absolutely.
There was a bank robbery.
I would love to read a book on the Spectrum scam because, I want to know. I mean, what? How? What do you have to do?
Okay, now enough of jokes, right? Let's elevate this to, since time is short and I have a very small brain, let's kind of elevate this into something more serious. The world and conduct is divided into two things, good and evil. All literature tries to explore various facets of good and evil. Now, whether it be Marquez or whether it be Zafon, whether it be Dickens, whether it be, any of the mainstream writers, or great crime writers like Dürrenmatt, who has this doomed detective. And also the detective is an anti-hero who is more impressive than if he was a hero. So, essentially, writing is about exploring good and evil. And nothing defines the interrogation of evil more than crime writing. I mean, whether it be in the ancient times, like or the Pharaoh or, Rome, or whether it be in New York City, whether it be in Paris, evil lives with us all the time. We are not aware of what people think in their minds, what resides in their minds, what plans people have for you in their minds, what hatred they hold you, in their hearts, and how it all comes out through crime, and how it gets translated into crime fiction. And there are two things it does to you. I mean, it either thrills or it quickens your pulse with anticipation. Now, since I'm forced to kind of make this a serious, focused discussion on whether crime thrills or not, I want to ask you about confronting the nature of evil in Pulp Fiction. I mean, does this thrill, does that bring fear, loathing? I mean, what communicates through this, the patois of crime rather than the elegant salon language of crime?
That's a big question.
I can be as intellectual as the rest of you. I was just kidding.
I don't know. Having had my head in Indian crime fiction for a lot, I would say Indian villains are slightly less evil in general than American villains, and especially the Scandinavian serial killers.
They're great
Those guys are really bad.
Yeah.
Like really, really bad. Indian villains tend to, have fairly humble goals. They want to have a nice lair with a big pit full of snakes or sharks.
Sorry, I got to interrupt you here for once. I think the greatest genre which has been exposed today, thanks to translation, is Scandinavian fiction. And I'm not just talking about Stieg Larsson. I'm talking about people like Eklund. I'm talking like, who wrote Inspector Wallander. What puts Spanish, crime writing separate from other crime writing is that it's more an examination of Spanish society. Scandinavian society. It's from the Nazi times to kind of, it's the socialist dream to, the whole disillusionment of the detective towards a changing landscape, changing moral, drugs, immigration. So through crime novels, whether it be Harry Hole or whether it be Inspector Wallander, they are all examining society. So, which is not present there in other crime novels. Believe me, I mean, you can have a caricature of a thriller or a serial killer or whatever. And we don't have much time. Otherwise, I would have told you a story about a serial killer I met in a Tennessee jail, but that's for another session. Anyway, these guys examine society, which I don't see that in French writers, even though there's some great writers. I don't see that in Spanish crime fiction. I don't see that in Italian crime fiction. Even, Camilleri is not really, it's not really kind of an examination of society. Now, why is it that these issues are relevant to any country, any culture? Because we live in the present. We think about the past that influences us. And the future we anticipate and we expect. So why is it that Scandinavian fiction doesn't thrill? But it makes you think. Why isn't other crime fiction? Because the purpose of crime fiction is not just thrill. It's also like all fiction making a statement. The floor is yours.
I don't know if I have a grand theory of crime fiction.
Naira, do you have an answer to that?
No, not really.
Man. Fail. All right. So what is the conclusion here? I mean, what are the conclusion both gentlemen have reached about the conversation we had?
Well, I think that, I mean, given that what we were talking about was, why crime thrills. It's all writing at the end of the day. And the ones it's all, the good writer is the one who succeeds. The good writers who choose to work in detective fiction are the ones who make crime fiction or detective fiction popular. It's more how the writer is wired. Stephen King once wrote that, if you see a black lagoon, I'll imagine a creature coming out of it, while a Western writer might imagine a cowboy, riding towards the lagoon. Personally, I'd imagine a fat man peeping up and saying, "Have you seen my bathing suit?" So, it depends on how you're wired. And I think that a lot of people are wired towards producing great crime. The reasons why they thrill are the same reasons why almost any good book would thrill you, because they've got great characters. I mean, you read Agatha Christie, of course, for the plots, but also because you love Hercule Poirot as a character. Tommy and Tuppence are plotted by the same author, but they're not as popular. So, it's where she got that formula. Absolutely. So it was just good writing, and that's what thrills you. But, I mean, that's the main part of it. But like I said right at the beginning, and I was kidding. I was saying it in a funny way, but it's true that we're inherently against rules, and crime is by definition a breaking of rules. So you get a thrill talking about, crime fiction is the only kind of fiction where for a fact that there's going to be some kind of crime inside it. Either someone's going to get killed or, some money is going to get stolen. Other kinds of fiction you don't know. Romantic fiction might have some crimes in it. You could argue that some romantic fiction itself is a crime, but it's not mandatory. But when you're picking up a book with crime fiction in it, for a fact that there's going to be some criminal elements. And one of the reasons they're so popular is because we kind of get this vicarious pleasure out of, living. It might not be that we approve of it. We are reassured when they're hauled off at the end. But you like going through that process, and you like being shocked and horrified. It's the same principle as horror, actually. You like that, oh my God, that repulsion. And I guess, those Scandinavians and others, those terrible villains, they're terrible villains because you want to build on that principle. You want to make, the bigger the crime, the more you're thrilled. That's kind of, maybe that's why the villains are the way they are.
Extra bad. Yeah. There's a Hindi superheroine crime detective lady called Reema Bharati. Has anyone seen a Reema Bharati book? Very popular in train stations. She's she's like a spy who sleeps with people to get information and then kills them. She drives a car with an invisibility switch. she's like an expert dancer. She infiltrates dance bars all the time to solve her crimes. She's pretty cool, but it's interesting because she's so on the back cover of those novels, they have a picture of her, Rima Bharati. She looks like a average middle-aged Punjabi lady, and she's supposedly the author as well as the character. But then there are other authors who have started writing books starring Rima Bharati as a character. And there are other ghost writers using the name Rima Bharati, but with different author pictures writing about other characters. So no one at this point is really sure whether Rima Bharati is a real person or not. She's like made the matrix leap from like fact to fiction. So sometimes I think maybe why crime thrills is because it offers that possibility of maybe I can make the jump. Maybe I can become the criminal.
I show one question for you.
Yeah.
I suppose the basic karma of the crime novel is the thrill, am I right? I mean, that's what it's supposed to be.
I guess so, yeah.
You're writing crime lit. You're writing a crime novel,
Yeah.
right? Does it thrill you?
Oh, that's a really good question. The crime novel that I wrote, it was Chandrahas is not here, but we were on the way back from a lit fest somewhere, and he was locked up in the same car with me, so he couldn't run away. So I asked him, "Hey Chandrahas, so what are you writing, man? What are you up to these days?" So he looked at me for a while, as if to consider whether to actually answer that question. But finally he did. And he said an interesting thing. He said that, Shobhan, not enough. There's still a lot of scope to play with the form of the novel. Not everything has been done yet. So I hadn't thought of things that way. So I thought, that's interesting, And so what can you do? And then I thought about the detective novel. And I thought, what kind of twist can you give to that? And one way would be to, of course, build in science fiction, which I like doing. Then I realized that there are a few books which do fall in that category. A lot of Asimov is essentially detection, the robot stories and other stuff, in a science fiction kind of environment. Others, Michael Chabon, the Yiddish Policeman's Ball. It's essentially science fiction, but a detective story. So I said, okay, fine. Other people have done that. So then I thought, what could make it, new is if it was science fiction and a detective story as well as a comedy at the same time, because I sort of saw that nobody else had done that. So what thrilled me was the opportunity to, of course, do crime fiction, because it's a challenge. If you can do it well, then, a lot of people enjoy it, a lot of people can have fun. And it's really, I think Agatha Christie is obviously a genius. When I started out trying to write a detective novel, one of the first things I did was I took 2 of her books, and I summarized the books in about 1.5 pages. Each chapter I summarized into about 2 lines or 3 lines, so the whole book was in 2 pages, And when you read it like that, it's scary, because you see the insides of her brain. You see how her mind used to work. It was diabolical. Plot turns and twists. And
she's a mathematician, really.
It was stuff like that. Yeah. So that's been it. So there's a lot of craftsmanship. So that was certainly from my side, I was thrilled by the challenge of doing that. But I wanted to add some stuff to it. So that's what I did. That was the thought. Also, nobody had really written the truth about a chief minister of West Bengal who was there for many years, but whom the legal department in Alif has said I should not be mentioning. But
that guy.
Yeah, that guy. No, you obviously haven't recognized him because I didn't give you any hints as to how you could. But that guy. Yeah. So I wanted to write about him. So that was another reason.
Okay, Rakesh. Bringing all these characters to life, people from Africa, which is an alien culture. Characters from Pulp Fiction, Tamil, Vernacular. Does it thrill you?
It's fun.
That's fine. Good. Go ahead. Some more.
Really, really fast-paced, I think.
Why does it thrill you? I mean, somebody else's idea, somebody else's imagination, and you bring them to life. So you have a responsibility. We had a translation discussion recently, but I think this goes beyond translation because you're portraying it into, a language which is very, very different from...
I guess because, we all imbibe so much Western pop culture, wherever we are. And I sort of moved to India hoping to escape some of the onslaught of Disney, which really bothers me. But you still get so much of it here, and there's so many Western stories that come at you wherever you are in the world, that I think it's kind of important to amplify modern, contemporary sometimes silly work that's being done in local languages. Like it doesn't have to be super serious literature, but fun pop stuff. And I just saw that these are like the most popular authors in the country, and they've sold. Rajesh Kumar has sold. He's written 1,600 novels. He sells like 30,000, 40,000 copies of each one. So those are massive numbers. And like nobody knew about him outside of Tamil Nadu. And I think that's true of like every regional language has people like that who are really working. Some of them are cheating it and plagiarizing and transplanting Western novels into their regional languages. But many others are doing original work, and they have massive readerships, and they have to be really good to command the interest of that many people. So I just think it's important, to amplify and try to bring that into English, try to bring it into other languages.
No, since this topic is all about thrill and adrenaline, I must draw your attention to innovation. As Chauvin was talking about earlier, how do you push the envelope? There is this great, I think it's Austrian, playwright called Frederick Dürrenmatt. Right. So Dürrenmatt wrote this crime novels about this detective. He's dying of cancer, right? He's dying of cancer and he is solving a murder. So it goes beyond thrilling. I mean, it goes beyond where his own doom and the doom he is anticipating for the murderer by catching him. Now that becomes a very tragic kind of thrill. It becomes a very, very tragic kind of thrill. Similarly, there is this detective, I forget the authors. I mean, his name is Max something, who is a blind man. And he solves crimes through the British railway timetable. It is so ingenious. Then there is the other kind of thrill where a crime has happened. For example, there is this series of books, again I forget the writer, called The Department of Dead Ends. Have you heard about that?
The name is familiar.
Yeah, The Department of Dead Ends is where the crime starts. The story starts with the crime. So the whole idea of the whole plot is that there is a department in Scotland Yard, which is manned by 3-4 weary policemen, where all dead cases, cold cases go to them. At some point or the other, they solve the cases. So the story actually starts with the conclusion and works backward. Now that is incredibly thrilling because you're going through the mind and the actions of the murderer. So, I mean, crime thrills in a lot of different ways. Any questions? Yep.
So I am more interested in villains. Like we need Jack the Rippers, we need golems, we need Moriartys for the hero in question to exist. So tapping into the mind of a criminal, like the heinous crimes he does and all, what would be the essential ingredients for an ideal villain? Like you mentioned Sherlock by Moffat. I was really skeptic about it. I felt like they will ruin Sherlock for me, but they sort of pulled it off. But what I believe was that Moriarty was sort of overdid. They overdid Moriarty. So to balance it out, I mean, what would be the essential ingredients for a villain?
I'd much rather show an answer.
Essentially, believability. Believability is the essential ingredient for a villain, which is, Richard III. I mean, if you read, you will end up reading, I'm sure, at some point, Shakespeare, right? Richard III, on the first page of that play, he explains very clearly everything. Why he is the way he is and why he's thinking the way he does. So the moment you understand his motivations, you even start, sympathizing a little bit with the villain. So I think it's very important for the villain to have a very clear, it can't just be a collection of characteristics like he's got funky hair and, only one arm and a hook instead. I mean, that's not going to make it work.
I disagree entirely. Mogambo is so cool, right? Why is Mogambo cool? He's not believable at all. He's completely overblown and silly. Those are my favorite villains. The ones that just exist, like the James Bond villains, who just exist to have really cool layers and
how about Moriarty?
Sorry?
Moriarty.
We have really overshot our time. I think we've been talking too much. I'll take one more question. The guy in the red T-shirt, yeah. And please keep it short. I mean, short, focused, not like us.
Yeah, short. Thank you for the wonderful session. I just want to say, short. When you said short, that means very little words. And if you think about crime things like modern days, people like Frank Miller, all these people had developed more visuals than words. So that's because maybe a curiosity about what happened.
No, I don't understand what you're asking. Just make it in one sentence or two max.
Telling how, excuse me, how crime thrills. So my part of saying is, it's not just a word, but
No, that's not a question. That's a
about
statement.
the event.
Well, I mean,
About
you're
the
making a
event.
statement. What's the
I just want
question?
to know whether it's words or literature in crime means a lot of visuals, which had been put into words, or like that guy just before I had expressed that we had read a lot of graphic novels or comics. So it's basically the event or the incident which actually built up a curiosity. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with you because it's.
No, I think crime
very
fiction is
specific.
very visual, yeah. I mean, like the villain, you want to be able to visualize the villain. The first thing they do is describe the detective, right? So yeah, it's very visual.
Well, since this is an unusual session on crime, I would like to invite the Compy Adhiksha on stage and end the session. All right, okay, got it.
Hello, my question is, why does only crime thriller man? Why does not something good or something better than crime? Why does only something bad thriller man?
That's not true. It depends what do you mean by thrill. I mean, you know.
He said that crime is inherited in man's mind. He gave an example of Jodu and Modu. Jodu killed Modu because he didn't want to take that deer, kill deers for only Modu and his wife. So he could have just left Modu and built his own house and taken deers.
It's because if the difference between us and animals is that we have to live together in a society, right? If we have to live in a society, we have to follow certain rules and regulations. If you have to live in a house, you have to, for example, wear clothes. Otherwise, everybody gets very upset. कि भाई तू कपड़ा क्यों नहीं पहन रहा है ना? So those things, even if we don't feel like doing, we have to do because of some outside force, right? But that's not natural to us. It's something we do so that we can all live together. But somewhere inside our hearts, that resistance is still there. You don't always want to do everything that mommy tells you, right? But even though your brain might tell you, yeah, it's the right thing to do, but you don't want to, right? So when you read something with crime in it, you get a little bit excited because you're reminded of that a little bit, you know, and you sort of relive it. So if somebody's being naughty, even if you're not being naughty, you like reading about them being naughty. You know? So I think that's where we're coming from. You know, why, you know, it's not about being thrilled about bad things. Remember, it's not really happening. It's only a story. You know, so you're living it through that story instead of actually going out and doing something weird. That's the thing.
Now invite the Compy to talk.
Romance can be good too.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this session. And yes, crime thrills, we all know, and you know, there have been interesting questions as well. But I will now request the editorial director of the New Indian Express, Mr. Prabhu Chawla, to please come and present mementos to our esteemed panelists here. Our chief guest for the closing session has already arrived, Union Minister of State for Petroleum and Natural Gas, Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan. I extend a warm welcome to him on behalf of the TNI family. So please. I don't know about stories, but I've personally been always hooked to those Life Okay, Savdhan Okay, Crime Patrol, Dastak.